Hi there and welcome back. So in this video we're going to look at trunk links, access ports, and also we're going to look at what happens when we connect two Cisco switches out of the box in their default configurations together. Ahead of time I've done some configuration which I'll show you in a second, but we're going to focus on switch 0 and switch 2. We're going to just ignore switch 1 for now. Just to make life simple, we're just going to worry about this link between switch 0 and switch 2. So what is a trunk port? A trunk port essentially is a port that can carry multiple VLAN traffic. An access port being a port which can only carry traffic for the VLAN that it is assigned to. By default, on a Cisco switch, if you configure a port as a trunk port, it will have access to all VLANs on that switch, which is probably not a good thing, especially if you have things like an accounting VLAN or a management VLAN that you don't want everybody to have access to. We'll get into VLANs at a later date. I appreciate I haven't really touched upon VLANs yet, so don't be too scared about that technology, that terminology. I just want to show you what happens really when we connect two Cisco switches together and why it is a bad thing. Okay, so let's open a console to switch 0, and we're going to enable mode. The interface we want to look at, we'll just do a quick show CDP neighbors, and we're interested in the link between this switch 0, and switch 2. So the local interface which connects to switch 2 is fast Ethernet 0/2, so we'll take a quick look at that. In fact, let me show you something that I've done ahead of time before I do that. So show VLAN brief shows you that I've actually set up multiple VLANs on this switch now. I have VLAN 10 and VLAN 1, which is set up by default. I've actually also set IP addresses up on each of these switches. Initially we set IP addresses up on VLAN 1, I've moved them now to VLAN 10. In fact, I've done the same thing over on the other switch. Let me just show you. VLAN 2, switch 2, sorry. Show VLAN brief. So we have two VLANs over here now. We have switch 10, which I'm using as the management VLAN right now, and VLAN 10 and VLAN 1, which is the default VLAN, of course. So both switches are pretty much configured identically. I've also assigned an IP address to VLAN 10 as 10.10.10.11. If I try and, let's say on switch 0, if I try and ping switch 2, it should fail. And I will show you why it's failing in a second. So both switches now have two VLANs configured. Let's take a look at the interface that actually connects to switch 2 in this case. So we're going to use the command show interfaces fast Ethernet 0/2, which is the connection between switch 0 here and switch 2. So it's this interface here. And the command is switch port. I just press enter. You can see we've got a whole ton of information here. Now we know the switch port is enabled, so it's able to carry traffic, which is good. The administrative mode is something called dynamic auto. Now both sides are set to this as default. So dynamic auto essentially means that it's waiting for DTP, the dynamic trunking protocol in Cisco, to initiate a trunk link. Now if both sides are set to dynamic auto, they're essentially waiting for DTP packets to be received on that link to form a trunk. If both sides are set to auto, neither side will actually send any DTP packets and a trunk will never be formed. You can see the operational mode is static access. Static access meaning that it will only carry traffic for one VLAN on this link now. The access mode VLAN is VLAN 1. So by default, VLAN 1 now is the only VLAN traffic that can be carried on this particular link, which is why when we actually try to ping the router the switch 2, when we tried to ping it, it actually timed out and failed. There's something called the administrative trunking encapsulation, which is set to .1Q. We're not going to worry about that too much. Essentially, there are two options for encapsulation on Cisco switches: .1Q, which is a default, and ISL, which is a Cisco proprietary older protocol for trunking between switches. very rarely used. I've never seen it used in production. We don't need to worry too much about that, but .1q is basically what defines VLANs on a particular link and how those VLANs are tagged essentially to identify which VLAN a particular packet is in. It uses .1q to tag those packets. We're not going to worry too much about that right now. Let me see what else. Negotiation of trunking is on. So these links will actually try and negotiate a trunk if somebody was to connect to it. By default, like I say, it's set to dynamic auto. There is another mode called dynamic desirable, and if I switch this interface to be dynamic desirable, it will actively try and form a trunk with switch 2. Because switch 2 is set by default to dynamic auto, when it sees those packets, it will automatically form that trunk. So when it sees the DTP packets coming from switch 0, because we switched it to dynamic desirable, when it sees those DTP packets arrive, it will automatically form a trunk and carry all traffic for all VLANs across that link. Now that's pretty much an inherent security risk. What could happen is somebody malicious or an attacker can connect their own switch, and if we've left that port in dynamic auto mode and they switch their side to be dynamic desirable to try and actively form that trunk link, then a trunk will be formed and that attacker would have access to all VLANs, all traffic on all VLANs on that switch, which is not a good thing. So what we will do, I'll just quickly show you that. If I go into configuration mode, and we'll go under the interface fast Ethernet 0/2, and we use the command switch port mode dynamic. You can see the other options in there: access, dynamic, and trunk. I'll touch on those again in a second. So we'll just choose dynamic in this instance, and the mode by default is auto, but we're going to switch one side of the link. So switch 0 is going to be set to desirable, and on the other side switch 2, I'll just move this over here, is going to be just remaining at default, which is auto. So I'm going to show you what happens when we switch one side to desirable. If I come out now and do a quick show interface fast Ethernet 0/2 switch port, we should see that, well, we can see the administrative mode has been switched to dynamic desirable, but now the operational mode is actually trunk. So this link is actually trunking now and able to carry all VLANs that are configured on the switch. Trunking VLANs enabled, all. So all traffic for all VLANs will now be carried across that link. That's how easy it was. I didn't have to do anything on switch 2 because it was set in automatic mode. Really, I don't know why Cisco would have this as the default, because it's an inherent security risk to do this. I really don't know why that's the default, but it is, and you should know about it for sure. Yes, what else can we do? So what I would recommend is, instead of leaving all your ports in this particular mode, dynamic auto, which is a default, that we change them to be hard set to trunk link. So if we expect a switch to be on the end of that particular interface on the other end, then we're good to switch it to switch port mode trunk, which I'll show you now. We really don't want anything to be too dynamic, because somebody comes along, connects a switch, and all hell could break loose essentially. So switch port mode, we're going to switch it to trunk in this case, and we'll do the same on the other side too. We also want to make sure that nothing can be dynamically negotiated on this particular link as well. So there is another setting here. You can see negotiation of trunking is currently switched to on. We don't want that, so we're going to do switch port non-negotiate, press enter. So now there'll be no dynamic negotiation on this port, and we'll do the same on the other side of the link. Let's bring up switch 2 and go into configuration mode. In fact, we'll just check which interface we need. Show CDP neighbors. You can see switch 0 is out of fast Ethernet 0/1, so we're going to configuration mode, interface fast 0/1, and we'll do the same on this side. So it's switch port mode trunk, and we'll do switch port non-negotiate. Now let's take a look at this interface. Show interface fast Ethernet 0/1 switch port, and we'll have a look what we've got. So switch port is enabled, administrative mode is trunk, operational mode is trunk, excellent. By default the encapsulation is set to .1Q, which is perfect. Negotiation of trunking, this is the important one, is off, so no trunks can be dynamically negotiated. We have hard set the operational and administrative modes to trunk though, so it is still trunking and carrying all VLANs across that link. What you would want to do in this case, if I do a quick show VLAN brief, so all of these ports here, in fact all of these ports on the switch except for fast Ethernet 0/1 are actually showing up in the VLANs. Now if we set a particular interface to be a trunk, which we have in this case for fast Ethernet 0/1, you won't actually see it listed in the VLANs anymore in the VLAN list. It actually disappears from that completely because it can carry traffic for all VLANs, so we don't need to know which VLAN it's assigned to. It just disappears from this list. I just wanted to show you that. What you would do as a rule, any interface where we don't expect a switch to be connected to, let's say in this case interface fast Ethernet 0/24, let's say. Now if we don't expect a switch to be connected to here, we should set the switch port mode to access. So switch port mode access, and currently it's actually assigned already to VLAN 10, but for instance if I wanted to assign it back to VLAN 1, I could do switch port access VLAN 1. Now I'm not going to go into VLANs too much right now. I don't think that would be a good thing for this video. We'll do that in a later video, but what I'm trying to show you is what you need to do out of the box for security reasons for when you're connecting two Cisco switches together. Always set all ports to switch port mode access out of the box when you first get a brand new Cisco switch, and then you can go and hard set the links where you expect a trunk to be formed, or the links where you expect to connect another switch to. You can hard set them using the switch port mode trunk command to actually form that trunk. A good thing to do actually, if you wanted to set all interfaces out of the box to be switch port mode access for security reasons, you could do that by doing the interface range command. So you do interface range and then specify the range for fast Ethernet 0/1 to 24 in this case. Oops, forgot the dash. This will allow you to make a change on all switch ports. So you would do switch port mode access, and all the ports on the switch would then be changed to access modes. I'm not access ports. I'm not going to do that right now. There's no need. We've already set up our trunk, and I don't want to break it. So, any questions? As always, give me a shout. I appreciate DTP can be quite confusing, but essentially, in fact, let me show you just before we go. I did bring up a little table here, which I'll attach to this video, that basically shows you what happens if you connect two Cisco switches together. If, for instance, in the first example, dynamic auto, which is a default, if one side is set to dynamic auto and the other side is set to dynamic auto, it becomes an access port. If one is set to dynamic desirable, which we did by setting switch 0 fast Ethernet 0/2 to dynamic desirable, and we leave dynamic auto on the other side, it forms a trunk. If we set both sides to trunk, which we also did in the video, so fast Ethernet 0/2 and fast on switch 0 and fast Ethernet 0/1 on switch 2, if we set both sides to a trunk manually, switch port mode trunk, then a trunk is formed. Obviously if we set one side to access and the other to dynamic auto, it's going to be access, and so on and so on. So really, out of when you first receive a Cisco switch, I would recommend that you do switch port mode access on all ports and then manually switch the trunks on the desired links. Also do switch port non-negotiate on all switch ports too, using the interface range command. So you want switch port mode access and switch port non-negotiate on all ports out of the box, and then manually configure your trunks to avoid somebody being able to come connect to your switch and actually form a trunk and receive all traffic for all VLANs. There's a little diagram here as well. Desirable, if it's both desirable on each side, of course it would be a trunk, because both sides are actively trying to form a trunk link. If you have desirable and auto, which we've already seen, it'll form a trunk. Auto and auto, which is the default out of the box, no trunk will be formed. But again, if that other side switches to desirable rather than auto, then you're going to see the trunk link. So hopefully that kind of makes sense to you. Any questions, as always, give me a shout. I'd be happy to answer any questions you do have, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.